Hey, this is James, Father's Rights and Resources with the hashtag How I Got Custody. I use the hashtag How I Got Custody, and I'm the only one who uses it because I got full custody of my daughter without a lawyer when I was a warehouse worker who flunked out of college and beat up on an attorney with 17 years experience. And then when the mother got another attorney a year later when we were back in court, she got an attorney with 37 years experience, and I repeatedly beat up on him. Now, if you want to see some samples of my winning documents and eventually some of my how-to videos, you can check out my store in the link below. So I want to talk to you about 4 different ways kids are traumatized, and usually the toxic parent inflicts 3 of them upon the kid with the help of the court. So first and foremost, it goes without saying that kids suffer trauma when a family is broken. Kids want a family to be intact. Kids want a family to be together. After you broke up, or if you were never together like me and my baby's mom, your kid still says, I wish you guys could be married. Why isn't mom and dad married? How come, what's wrong with me if there's a divorce? What did I do? And kids blame themselves, and they can't handle the trauma of divorce. They can't process it. They're not mature enough usually. Even if they're in their teenage years, their brains don't finish developing until they're about 25. So a broken family is traumatic to a kid. Psychologists tell you when you're together, and counselors will tell you this, whether they're a social worker or whatever, when you're together, spend quality and quantity of time with your kids because kids need that. So if that's broken up, if the ideal is a 2-parent home with kids and family intact, loving, devoted parents, loving and devoted to the kids, that's the ideal. Now that's not as common, but it's still the ideal. Now, a lot of idiots out there will say, oh, there's a lot of success stories of kids of single parents. Yeah, I know that. There's exceptions to every rule. There's a lot of bodybuilders out there who might eat junk food or eat like crap in the off season, and they're still relatively healthy. The optimum still would be, if you want perfect optimum health, then you eat only real, raw, natural, organic foods all the time, and you lift weights, and you get cardio. And if you miss out on one of those, you're not doing the ideal thing, but you still might be in pretty good shape. But the ideal is still the ideal. And there might be people out there who, I don't know, smoke cigars like George Burns did and you live to be 100. Those exceptions have nothing to do with the overall ideal goal. So all this stupid crap about, oh, well, there's other people in untraditional families that are doing just fine. Yeah, there's going to be exceptions, but the ideal is still the ideal, just like in any other area of life. Okay, a football team, you could study film, practice all week long, lift weights, work extremely hard, do extra, gassers at the end of football practice and be in optimum shape. Or you can kind of halfway do that, and if you're more talented, you might still win. There's exceptions to that stuff, but the ideal is still to maximize everything and to do everything in the ideal situation. There's overwhelming data that shows when a father's not involved in a kid's life, they're exponentially at risk for teenage pregnancy, getting on drugs, suicidal, depression, dropping out of school, homelessness, all those things, getting in jail. 90% of those people didn't have an involved father. They came from broken homes. Gang banging. When kids go and join gangs, obviously they're doing that because they need male affirmation, which may be the most important thing a parent can deliver to a kid. If you can deliver confidence to a kid by affirming who they are and their character and that they can conquer anything, almost everything else doesn't even matter. Even if they didn't get all the emotional love and affection and attention that they need to get. That's all a nice bonus also. But if you instill confidence in them that they can conquer the world, how can you think of anything that's more important than that? So when they miss that male affirmation that they get, those of you who are also Bible believers, I mean, the Savior of the world needed male affirmation when he got baptized, and the Father said, "This is my Son in whom I'm well pleased." If the Savior of the world needed male affirmation, how much more do the rest of us need it? And everybody knows about the psychology of talking to yourself and boosting yourself up if you want to be a world-class athlete, or you're about to give a speech, or you want to be successful and conquer stuff. This positive affirmation, you tell yourself you can do it, and you can almost talk yourself into doing it. If you're an utter failure at something, you can almost talk yourself out of it by talking yourself into being successful. So if you get affirmation from your parents before you learn how am I supposed to be confident or learn anything about life, think about how empowering that is to kids and their confidence and their self-esteem. But these kids have to deal with a broken family. Dad's not around. How come dad abandoned me? How come dad doesn't want to see me? Because the mother's alienating them and abusing the court system. So, that being said, kids already suffer an automatic trauma by a broken family. So, how do you mend a broken relationship? A broken friendship, a long lost friendship you haven't seen in a while, and you run into a friend on Facebook, or you fall out of love with your girlfriend or boyfriend. What do? The number one remedy is to spend quality time together, because time spent builds intimacy and restores stuff like that. So what do the courts do? They separate the parents even more and make one parent every other weekend visitor in the kid's life. So there's trauma from the broken family, and then they separate them even more. Okay? So one parent goes to court and has these heathen courts who don't care about kids, who go to seminars and they talk about this is how we can make as much money off of child support, and this is how we can make the court system money, and we're going to traffic and pass the kids around like it's a slave trade, and they're on, they're on the sales block or whatever they used to call it when they stood the slaves up and they were selling them to people. The courts push them further away, which is insane, because the courts think, and there's a lot of states out there that have these cookie cutter setups where here's our cookie cutter parenting sample, or there's different names for it in different states where they have a cookie cutter setup where there's a default position. Okay, this is the default parenting plan. Unless somebody approves abuse or something like that, this is it. One parent has custody, the other parent has every other weekend. They don't think about, what if the parents live one block away? What if the parent's totally involved? What if one parent works from home and they're totally available during the day? That other parent still gets custody and they pick a daycare. See, this is what's crazy, and this is what I would be arguing in court, is that you want to make me every other weekend visitor in the child's life. Who's more important in the child's life outside of the parents? Like I do in my 50-50 video, my argument that says the number one argument, my video that says the number one argument for 50-50, same argument that I would use for custody and stuff like that. In any case, when I talk about outside of food, water, and air, what's the most important thing in a kid's life? The love, security, and stability of both parents. So why would you push that out? And you're pushing it out in favor of things like teachers and daycare providers and coaches and peer friends. I've seen courts say this teenage child needs their friends more than their own mother, when a non-custodial mother was fighting for 50-50. That Judge Prock now in King County, who's now a mediator in mediating cases and making money off of that hustle in Seattle, she said that stupid bullcrap. The thing is, if I'm an every other weekend visitor, how come the school gets to see my kid 5 times a week and I only get to see him four times a month? How come the daycare gets to see my kid every day? These are not lasting relationships. Those people won't be in the child's life. They may not be in the child's life for more than a year. I'm always going to be the child's father, and I'm relegated to an every other weekend visitor. That's insane. If this is about the needs of the child, how come somebody who actually is a visitor in their life, a daycare provider or a teacher who will be out of their life within months or years, and I will always be their father, how come I'm last on the list in priority as to how much time gets spent with them? And if the children suffer trauma from a broken family, why wouldn't you want to mend that broken wound as much as possible? But the courts separate it. Or they pour salt in that wound and they open the wound even more. And then the courts do things like supervised visitation and all these other things merely because there's an allegation. And I've done videos before where I talk about here's where a court incriminates themselves. They'll say, the mother's accusing you of an anger problem. I want you to go get an anger assessment. In the meantime, you get supervised visitation. I want you to get an anger assessment and any treatment like domestic violence treatment if that's what the anger assessor finds. What are those people going to do? The domestic violence or anger management assessor is going to say, you have a problem. Oh, by the way, you need help. Oh, by the way, we have a program for a year of treatment, so I'm going to refer you and recommend you to our treatment program so I can make as much money as possible off of you. It's a big hustle and a con. But the thing about the courts is they say, the mother is accusing you of anger management and you being in danger. I want you to get assessment to see if that's actually a problem. In the meantime, I'm going to act like you have the problem and you're guilty of it. What courthouse will sentence you to the death penalty because somebody alleges you committed murder? You have to wait until you go through the process and they make a finding of fact that you actually did it. Then you get the death penalty or life imprisonment. These people are saying, I'm going to punish you and your children as if you're a domestic violence perpetrator, but I don't know for sure, so I want you to go get evaluated to see if you actually have that problem. So there's no innocent until proven guilty in family court. It's guilty of whatever allegation, and you need to pay lots of money to prove that you don't have that problem. And in the meantime, I'm going to deprive the kids of you, even though you live with them and they're used to seeing you every day. I'm going to rip you out of their life merely because of an allegation. And attorneys should be arguing what I'm just saying in court all the time, but they're not. And attorneys should be arguing the basic life need of children outside of food, water, and air. How dare you have anything involved in the kid's life other than the father and the mother, first and foremost. But attorneys won't argue this. And so the attorneys won't argue the reality of what the child's real needs are. And they won't argue the trauma that happens to a child because that's too politically incorrect. They go through their routine. They fill out papers. They say, oh, Your Honor, please give my client, whether it's the father or the mother, some time with the kids. Please do so. I beg of you. And they walk out and they say, I can't believe how corrupt the system is. They're biased. Oh, if you were the mother, you would have gotten away with that, or whatever. Why don't you argue the stuff you're talking to me off the record about when you're being completely real and completely 100 with me? Why don't you argue that in court where it matters? See, the entire culture of the court system has a routine of the way they've always done stuff. Just like in the 50s, the courts always looked at any kind of lawsuits. Well, black people are inferior because separate but equal is equal. They get inferior schools. They get a water fountain that's tainted with lead poisoning and all this other stuff, while the clean water goes to the white people. We used to say separate but equal is equal, which is asinine that we even had that. It's asinine that we had slavery, and then out of slavery, we had Jim Crow laws, and then we finally got some constitutional rights clarifying what was already in the Constitution. They say separate but equal is equal. How could a court system say separate facilities is automatically equal? Schools where there's no books and no tax funding from house buyers is equal to the suburbs where the parents are rich. How could they actually say that? Because the culture of the court system and the people in it interpreted the law in a racist or biased way. Right now you have a culture of court system that's predominantly anti-male, anti-father, and pro-radical feminist, interpreting everything in that prejudice and in that light. They see justice. Now, the Constitution is great. Some of our laws are great. And that's why these stupid jackasses in the fathers' rights movement are wasting their time trying to change laws, because it'll just be another law that the next judge ignores, you stupid moronic idiot who can't use, half a brain activity in your brain. You can't use the common sense that God gave a monkey to figure this out and use deductive reasoning and say, man, they're not listening to the good laws in the books. If we pass another law and the problem is them ignoring the law, how does that help? But every generation of fathers' rights, a couple years, all these fathers' rights groups go and try and pass stuff in the legislature. It gets shot down like it did the past 50 years. They don't do any research and learn any lessons. And then I come in and tell them this is what happened. This is what needs to happen. They're like, screw you. This is my pet baby. This is my pet project. This is my baby. I'm going to be the Martin Luther King of the fathers' rights movement. And these stupid jackasses go in and try and pass a law that won't change or fix anything, because the problem is the heart of the judge and the culture of the court system. Think about corruption, like I use an example like this all the time. In Mississippi in the 50s, you think a black man accused of raping a white woman is going to get a fair trial? Or the 40s or the 30s. The judge, the jury, even his public defender might be in the Klan. And if his public defender is there to fight for justice, they're afraid of the Klan burning their house down, because the Klan thinks that it's even worse to be an advocate for black people. Their hatred for black people, you're even worse than the black people that I hate, because you're helping them out and you're a sellout. So that person might have been afraid. So the entire culture of the courtroom caused a black person to not get a fair trial. Didn't they have rights? And it's the same Constitution on paper and equality on paper? Of course they did. So how come they didn't get it in the courtroom, when the courtroom is a court of justice and law and facts and equity? Because the culture of the courtroom is filled with corrupt idiots. So you have a culture of a courtroom filled with corrupt idiots. Now, when the culture changed as far as racial issues in the court system, things like lawsuits for civil rights were happening. Do you think those lawyers were afraid to go to court and zealously argue for their client who got discriminated against in violation of the Civil Rights Act? The culture of the courtroom, of that courtroom in Arkansas or Mississippi or Alabama, where that may have still been racist, but you think they were afraid to do anything, or they stood up to it? They stood up to it. And because people kept standing up to it and standing up to it and standing up to it and pushing back against this wall of racism in the courtroom, the entire culture started changing. Now, not to say that everything's perfect, but it's way better than it used to be because of the pushback. So what your attorney does and what all these other attorneys do, they don't ever speak up against this culture of anti-father, radical feminism. You don't have to use those words in there, but you have to talk about equality with the parents. They go in and say, you'll never get custody, you'll never get 50-50, so we're not even going to try. How many times have you ever tried? I've never tried that, but that's because the system won't let you. So nobody ever tries anything, and nobody ever gets anything, and they turn to the next client and say, you'll never get anything. So we're not even going to try, so I'm not going to stand up to it. And then you go in with your half-hearted, halfway, pathetic, lazy argument, talking about the attorney, and you don't argue or get on the offensive and attack the drug addict mother who lives with a registered sex offender because you don't want to make her look bad because it'll make you look bad for calling her out for all these destructive things for the kids. And the law might say, like it does in Washington, if you live with a sex offender, you should automatically be restricted from your kid. If you commit domestic violence or have a mental health issue or drug addiction, the kids should automatically be taken out. So the attorney won't even attempt to use the evidence against you. Do you think a prosecutor, if they got video footage of a janitor molesting a kid at a daycare, they're going to say, you know what, I don't want to make them look that bad. We're trying to win the court's heart over and we want to look nice. No, they'll go in there and in their opening and closing argument say what a heinous monster this person is and attack them and call it what it is and they'll use all the evidence, fingerprints, video surveillance, testimony from the kid, testimony from the parents and the daycare provider, all that stuff. Why would they hold back? They throw the book at them. They throw everything but the kitchen sink at them. Only in family court do they say, well, let's let up and let's not get on the offensive. Let's not use evidence that helps your case against the other side. Let's just sit back and hope the judge just reads a crystal ball and does the right thing. And they never do. Then your attorney says, don't go for full custody. That'll look too aggressive. Who wouldn't go for full custody when other parents an alienator or toxic or whatever? So, I'm getting off on a tangent, but the number one trauma is just a broken family. Kids are traumatized by that. Number two, how do we fix that? We mend the relationships, or we maintain the family as much as possible. Even though it's broken, let's say the family's broken and there's living in separate places and they're living far away and all this stuff. What's the best thing for the kids? To mend that family is about as close as possible. Like it was here before. Let's bring it back to here. Let's have the parents have 50-50. And then if a parent can't watch the kid, then they default to the other parent or right of first refusal or whatever. Or 60-40. Instead, they make it every other weekend. Or they make it supervised visitation because they're false allegations. You get further and further apart and you pour salt in the wound. Now, the third trauma that they suffer is when the parent is actually withholding the children, whether there's a court order or not, violating the court order, withholding the children upon separation. All of a sudden, that kid was used to seeing dad when he comes home, giving him a hug, just knowing dad was there for him and around, and now all of a sudden he's out of his life. Now all of a sudden he's just gone. So the family breaking up, knowing I'm going to see dad on the weekend, that's a little better than he's totally gone. I don't know when I'm going to see him. And the mother's probably saying your dad doesn't want to see you. You're lying, because she's not going to say, oh, I'm pushing your dad out because I hate him. I hate his new girlfriend and stuff. They're not going to say stuff like that, right? So that being said, when the parent forces the child out. So number two and number three are kind of one and the same, but it's the court doing it one time, and I went off on a tangent about how illogical and stupid that is and how your attorneys won't mention it. I mean, if everybody just dropped their attorney and everybody went to court and started arguing this stuff, and you have to, if somebody's brainwashed into something, you have to repeatedly tell them something. You know, faith comes by hearing, or, you know, you get brainwashed by repeatedly hearing something. Hitler's number one propagandist said if you tell somebody a lie long enough, they'll eventually believe it. That's what the principal politicians work on, or the media works on, or what they're talking about with this fake pandemic that's going on. They said it over and over till everybody just freaked out. And you ask them, okay, where's the evidence? Where's the data? What do you see? You can't see an invisible virus. There's hundreds of thousands of other scientists saying stuff different than what we're hearing from mainstream media, but you don't hear that because that's not pumped out in the media. So that's what propaganda is. You know, repeatedly telling somebody a lie to the point where they're in fear. You know, under Bush's orange, red, and green alerts. We are afraid that there's a terrorist under every rock and around every corner, and we're in constant state of fear. Then they passed the Patriot Act, which violates our rights, and we can get spied on as long as we're labeled a terrorist. Well, if you look at the definition of terrorist, that could be anything or anybody. If somebody protests peacefully outside a courthouse, they'd be considered a terrorist. And then under Obama, you could be arrested, detained, and not have an attorney or a trial indefinitely, which means forever, if you're deemed a terrorist or a potential future threat as a terrorist. So they basically set it up, they can arrest and detain anybody any way that they want. They started off with fear and propaganda. And now we're at a place and age where in 1999 you would never think of this even being possible. we're living in a soft fascist communist state, and we always had some kind of soft communism, and we were never fully following the Constitution, and in family court we're not following it at all, and they don't even. I've seen a commissioner or judge say that the rules of evidence don't apply here. This is family court. Well, the rules of evidence do apply, and if you violate the rules of evidence, that's that's an unfair hearing, which is a violation of due process and the Constitution. So you have judges openly saying, I'm going to violate the Constitution. Now, they say it indirectly, but if you know anything about anything, when a judge says something stupid, you could sit there and break it down and say, you're an unconstitutional judge and you're a traitor to this country. You should be jailed for life. So, I went on a tangent there. That's a little bit of an extra freebie for you. See, this is all stuff your attorney's not going to tell you. Or no one will tell you, probably. And you can find all this stuff out on your own like I did. It's all out there. I'm just sharing stuff that's out there. So some people say, oh, he's acting like a lawyer practicing law without license. No, I'm sharing information that's out there. I have a free speech right to do that. I'm telling people what I did on my case. I'm selling packets of winning documents that I did. I'm about to do some how-to videos telling people what I did. If you want to glean off of that, that's your free choice. But I have a free speech right to get out here and say this. Lawyers hate that because if all of you learned how to represent yourselves, they'd be out of business. That's why they keep you in the dark and they don't want you to know what's going on, or they're too stupid to even understand why they do what they do. They just go through their routine, get a big fat $5,000 retainer, maybe fight for you at 1 or 2 hearings, and after that it's go to mediation. Let me sit there and just, they'll talk with you, email, consult, milk that $5,000, and now it's time to go to mediation. Well, I need $2,000 because I'm going to sit there with you for 8 hours that day and just yak away about what the mother isn't going to agree to, and we're going to waste our time on court-ordered mandated mediation. I have a whole video on how mediation is a scam. And then, if you guys don't resolve it, I'm going to say, well, the attorneys will push in mediation, settle. Because if they don't, then we're going to trial, and the attorney has to do a whole bunch of work. And they have to do things like, make trial notebooks like this. This is a trial notebook that I had back in 2004. You see that it says 3 of 5? I had 5 volumes of notebooks with all these exhibits. I had like 320 exhibits. And I was going to take the mother to trial until she backed out. I was all ready and prepared to go to trial. Now, at that time I had an attorney because I was afraid about going to trial, but he had me do all the work. I had a judge praise his writing, and he said, actually, James did the writing. They're like, oh, maybe he should go to law school. So I did all the work and stuff like that. He was just a mouthpiece. And then I realized, wait a minute, I could do all this stuff myself. And he fumbled and bumbled at some things. And now I know I've worked with countless people who put on their own trials for 2, 3, 4 days and got 50-50 or full custody or did better and didn't get slammed with attorney fees from the other side. All kinds of stuff. Saved thousands of dollars representing themselves. Painters, construction workers, flight attendants. And at the end, the judge will say, you're the best pro se or self-represented party I've ever seen. You had your stuff together. Or they say, did you go to law school? Where did you learn all this stuff? Because you looked better than the lawyer. I had a guy from the audience when I was in the Court of Appeals making an oral argument. He came out and he said, man, you're not a lawyer. And you went in there, you look like the lawyer, and he looked like the pro se, self-represented. Pro se, Latin term for self. They like to use all these Latin terms to make themselves sound smart because these lawyers flatter themselves and their own egos. But this guy told me, attorney with 40 years experience by that time, we're in the Court of Appeals. I make him look stupid. Somebody in the audience walks out and says, oh my God, you look like the lawyer, and he looked like the self-represented party who's never done this before. So, back on the topic. Giving you a bunch of freebies in here. This is what happens in a consultation. If we get to a point where you need information, sometimes there's information where you don't know even what you're asking for, and I'll give you answers where you didn't even, like you said, hey, I need to answer this, and then you'll talk about what's going on. I'll say, wait, you need to know this, and this. The information out here is endless, okay? It's simple because some of the arguments or the things are straightforward. Children need parents. If you break them up from their parents, if a kidnapper takes a kid away from the parents, they're traumatized, okay? If the court takes a kid away from the parents, they're traumatized. It's the same thing. The kid doesn't understand whether it's a kidnapper, court, or whatever. This is very simple. But attorneys can't make simple arguments because they're stupid and they're moronic and they're taught by the others. When they come out of law school, they're taught how to be a lawyer out of law school. They don't learn how to be a lawyer in law school. And they're taught, this is how we do stuff. Don't fight against the mother. Don't look bad. Don't get aggressive and all this stuff. All these things that work for me, they say don't do that stuff. And then the dads lose and get screwed. And then the attorneys charge you a bunch of money. And like I was saying, you get to mediation, you spent $10,000 on them. Like, well, I'm going to need $10,000 if you want to go to trial, which is basically a threat to get them to settle, because as soon as the mediation is over, they'll go get another client and get another $5,000. And did they lift a finger or even fight that hard? No. Now, if they go to trial and fight for you, that's blood, sweat, and tears, staying up late at night. If you watch a movie like A Few Good Men or any other movie, you see them lawyers staying up late at night, studying, prepping witnesses, and being totally exhausted. It's work. So these attorneys have learned how to milk you for all that you got, and then when it gets to mediation, drag the mediation out as long as possible and tell them, you got to settle or we're going to trial or I'm going to dump you. They talk good game in their sales pitch to have you come on board, and then by the time you get to mediation, they want to dump you because they want to move on to the next case because they're tired. Even the attorney that I worked with that was extremely aggressive, who almost fought the opposing attorney in the court hallways, he said, maybe it's time for you to just settle, because he got tired of my case. It dragged out for a year and a half. The mother objected to me moving from Seattle to Tacoma, 30 miles, and she lived in California. She was abusing the relocation law up here, and I was in court, and it dragged out for a year and a half. So I could write a whole book just on that one action. My original custody action lasted 7 months. Then that was ended October 2001. Then in February 2003 is when I moved, and she objected to me moving. Her attorney abused the relocation laws to have me try and restrain me in the home and keep our child homeless because the house was being put up for sale and we wouldn't have a place to go. Anyway, so I've been in and out of court off and on, for those of you who didn't know, for almost 18 years. I was in and out of court regularly. The number of documents in my file exceeds 1,100. The average contested and conflict-riddled divorce has like 250 documents in it. I have 1,100 in mine because we're back and forth in court for years and years. And the mother abused the court system, and she was never in the state of Washington for most of my kid's life, and abandoned her, and she got to have an attorney who personally hated my guts and made it his personal mission to stalk me in the court system, dragged me in and out of court for 18 years. So people say, oh, you had it easy because you got custody. No, I went through hell for 18 years because I had to deal with false allegations, and the mother would even have the audacity to say I'm not raising the child properly and all this other stuff, and she would abandon the child for 1.5 years and 3 years and 5 and 7 years, no contact with her whatsoever. And she had the nerve to come to court and say that, I abandoned the child, after she abandoned the child, I'm neglecting the child or not doing enough. So that being said, I have been in and out of court. So just so people know, oh, you got it easy, you got lucky, you got the mother who quit or gave up or threw in the towel. I had to beat her up and win several hearings to get her to surrender to a point where I got full custody. That's the only thing I've ever seen work for anybody. 95% of cases settle out of court. Whoever has the most leverage wins. So we got, number one is the trauma of just a broken family. Number two is the court separating the kids. Number three is somebody violating, a parent withholding the children, which is kind of the same thing as a court order, but whether there's a court order or not, they're withholding the children. Then number four, there's this, which is putting the children in the middle of parental conflict. Now, psychologists say when you're together in an intact marriage or family, don't argue in front of the kids, because kids can't process grown folks' conflict. Okay, they just see mommy and dad. They want to see mommy and daddy lovey and dovey and all that stuff, and committed and devoted. Excuse me. But they see them fighting. That's traumatic to them. So then some of these parents will put the child in the middle of conflict. Tell your dad you don't want to go, or your dad hates you, and they paint them with this toxic propaganda and brainwash them again and alienate them against the other parent. Now, if let's say a kid once in a while doesn't feel like going with dad or whatever, and then an alienating parent rides that out for years or months. Well, that kid on a whim just didn't feel like going one day. That doesn't mean they don't want a relationship with that parent. So, but even if a child doesn't want to go, if I'm in court and the parent says, well, the child doesn't want to go with the father, the child can't stand the father, they fell apart and the father just doesn't have a bond with them. First of all, who does the child live with? If the culture of that home is loving and excited for them, like, you got to see your dad today, and they have pictures of their dad on the wall, that stuff will never happen. So that person is admitting that the culture of my house is anti-father or undermines the father, or it's toxic and it's alienating. So I'd be telling the court, if she's saying the child doesn't want to go with me, okay, what does she do when the child doesn't want to wake up or eat their vegetables or take a bath or go to school? Does she let the child dictate what goes on in the home? She's admitting she has no control over the children and they're out of control and they get to dictate what they want. And she's not the grown-up and the children are the grown-up and she's the child and she obeys them. That means her house is out of control and she can't parent. She's incriminating herself. Or the only other explanation is it's a toxic environment where it's anti-father and the kids pick up on that and they just believe. Do kids come out of the womb automatically racist? No. We see videos of kids playing with people of different cultures and stuff like that. They learn that stuff. Do kids come out of the womb automatically hating their parents? Of course not. They learn that stuff. So I would be saying this stuff in court. But you know what? This basic common sense that everybody already knows that you don't really need to prove. Just by her own admission that the children don't want to go with the father, you never encouraged it, you never made it a culture of love for the other parent. And I would say this, that parent hates me more than that parent loves the children, if that parent even loves the children. But if the parent is saying that, telling the children to hate the father or allowing this toxic environment and not correct, let's say it was from the kids, the parents can correct that. Let's say the kid says, I hate school, I don't want to go to school. You have to go to school, you have to learn, you have to get a job. Let's say the kid says, I don't want to go with dad today. That's your father, he loves you, you need to spend time with him. Boom! Answer corrected, or problem corrected. But they're saying they're incapable of doing that. So that's basis for giving me custody because I can honor the other parent's relationship. I'll have pictures of the mother on the wall and all the other stuff and encourage the visitation exchange. She's incapable of doing that. A lot of laws in a lot of states that your attorney doesn't even argue because they're a stupid jackass. And now, so you got laws in the states, everything starts with the law. I got a video that says it all starts with the law. And your attorney won't argue the law. Some of the laws in some states say which parent it can honor and facilitate the other parent's relationship with the child. This parent is saying the kids don't want to go. That parent is incapable of coaching the child, encouraging the child, and creating a loving environment. Instead, she creates a toxic environment that's anti-father, undermining the other parent. And same thing for mothers. There's toxic fathers out there, but this predominantly is more common with mothers. And they're basically incriminating themselves. But lawyers don't jump all over this. And this is common sense. This is third grade level common sense. You don't need to be a legal scholar to figure this stuff out. I easily figured out this common sense stuff on my own, and I'm a warehouse worker who flunked out of college. Now I went back to school and got a degree in law and justice from Central Washington University, but I had already had experience doing this. That's like somebody going to some kind of mechanic training or whatever, and their dad taught them everything about cars. You just, or some kid who grew up in a Hispanic household, and they speak English and they take Spanish for college. You already know all this stuff, okay? But I've proven that anybody can do this stuff, and you don't need a law degree. So when you put the child in the middle of parental conflict, you're dumping toxicity on that kid. You're pouring and raining toxicity and conflict on them. Stuff that they shouldn't even have to comprehend. They should just be being a kid. I want to have be a kid, have fun, go play, go to school, be around my friends, and see my parents whenever I want. No, hate your dad. Your dad sucks. Your dad's this. Your dad did that. Your dad yada yada. Don't go with your dad. You don't have to go with your dad if you don't want to. And then there's peer pressure, and then they have allegiance to the parent who's the custodial parent because they're punished if they say, "I want daddy." You shut your mouth. Don't talk bad about daddy. Like I grew up in an alcoholic family. My mom's side of the family, her parents, used to talk bad about my dad, and he was an alcoholic, and when he was drunk, he was a bad person. But I knew that wasn't really him. It was the alcohol. When I was 10 years old, I still didn't want to hear it from somebody else that my dad sucked. I had my issues with him when he was drunk, but he was still my dad and I still loved him. And kids look past, even kids who are abused look past that, and they just want to be loved by that parent because that is their parent, okay? How much more of a parent who's not an abuser, the kids being coached to not like their parent, how much more can they not tolerate that when it's a lie and it's bullcrap? When kids still love their parents who are alcoholics or drug addicts or abandon them or even abuse them. They just want to be loved by that parent because that is their parent. There's a natural God-given desire for that void to be filled. Or if you don't believe in a God, that's still nature's order. Look at monkeys. They cling to their mom, okay? So if you got a problem with me saying that, that's pretty much too bad because that's the scientific natural order of the universe anyway. And when I talk about structured family, it's the same thing. You can try and come up with some stupid politically correct bullcrap if you want to, but the obvious way that humankind has survived and moved on is by a structured family, and all the current scientific data shows that that's the ideal. Whether or not there's success stories among, like even my situation, my child is in a safer place with me than with the mom, but it's still not ideal. I would have wanted for my baby's mom to get along with me for the sake of the child. She didn't want to. She cut me off and moved on. I'm not going to pursue her. Screw her. So I still admit the ideal is the ideal. Although, dads are the protectors, so it's always safer, even statistically speaking, for a child to be with the father out of broken families. Dad's a protector, the mother's a nurturer. I used to go to some of the players at the malls, and I'd see moms fall asleep, and I was paranoid to even feel halfway tired, like I'm going to doze off and fall asleep and my kid's going to get nabbed. I used to see mothers, and I saw a mother and a grandmother lose track of this 1-year-old. Looked like they just started walking. They walked out of the player and they're walking into Target. I'm looking around like nobody's going to get this kid. I went and got the kid, and I said, "Is this your kid? Is this your kid? Is it?" And they said, the grandmother, the mother's asleep, and the grandmother's just there not paying attention. And they look like they were from a meth-infested trailer park, honestly. But, I'm handing the child over. I said, he was walking into Target. And then I start walking away. No, oh, thank you. I'm glad you grabbed him. We were being stupid or whatever. The grandmother turns to the mother and said, "Oh, he was walking to Target." Like, there's no big deal. I mean, there's predators probably out there. The odds are against it, but there's still enough odds where you want to make it zero chance possible. But a lot of mothers don't think like that. Now, I know some protective single moms, but in general, the man is the protector and the mother's the nurturer. So, my daughter's in a safer place, but I would never say something stupid like, "Oh, well, my daughter turned out pretty good with me." It's still ideal. She still had issues with her mom, abandoning her, not being around, all that stuff. And I had pictures of her mom up. I have videos and pictures in the background in our home with the mom up. So I never alienated her. So when a parent introduces a child to parental conflict, that's something they can't handle. First of all, they should just be being a kid. Second of all, their brains haven't developed. If they're under teenage years, they really don't want to hear that, and they're totally lost. Once they get to be a teenager, they're like, "Oh, my mom and dad are crazy," or they're fighting with one another. They still don't want to be pitted against one another and still not fully mature and developed. So what the other person is doing is they're committing child abuse because they're putting upon them. So I take these 4 things. This child's already traumatized from the broken family. The best way to mend that is to spend as much time together. The mother's been withholding the child from me and harming the child even more and pouring salt on the wound. And she wants the court to order more trauma by limiting the access. Although she wants the child to be around teachers, friends, family, extended family, all these other people who are not written down in the law. The law says that the state recognizes the fundamental importance of the child relationship between both parents. And it's fundamental to the needs of the child. So the government recognizes that. It's in the constitutional case law. It's in the RCW in Washington State, if I'm arguing my case. It's common sense with psychologists who say, spend quality time with your kids while you're living in the home. How much more do you need to spend quality time when the family's broken and there's trauma and the kids blaming themselves and they're like, "How come my parents can't stay together? It must be my fault." You mend that by showering them with love and covering the wound. You're using bag balm or, whatever they used, alcohol swab and stuff to clean up the wound and bandage it. You're bandaging it and showering it with love, okay? And, what's cracked or broken, you're mending it and smoothing it out as much as possible in life. But they won't allow that with a court order. Then the mother showers the kid with toxicity and poison. It's like radiation. They're having that's what I call it. This is the first time I ever said this. I just thought the mother is having a nuclear war with their own child because they're showering them with toxic poison of parental conflict, and the child cannot handle that. The child's already traumatized by the broken family, and then by the court-ordered separation and limited access, and now the mother's showering them with conflict and parental conflict. The mother is abusing the child and psychologically traumatizing the child, just like a kidnapper would and say, "You don't need your parents, screw your parents," and they're crying because they want their parents and they're held hostage somewhere. So I would be arguing those things. There's 4 different traumas that happen to a kid. 3 are inflicted by an alienating parent and the court. And I would be picking them apart with this kind of stuff. This is easy pickings, but attorneys won't do this. This is overwhelming evidence for the other parent being an unfit, child-abusing parent that should be ripped from their custodial status, and the child should be living with me. But nobody wants to argue this stuff. And this is what's frustrating, because a lot of times I have all these videos. Like when I first started out, I had nobody helping me. And then I had a godsend of a guy who did help me. But that guy would take a book. Like, let's see if I have a rule book here. Okay, let's say this is the rule. I don't have the rule book here. Oh, here's the rules of court annotated. So I would meet with him, and he would say, okay, here's Civil Rule 7. Let me highlight this. Okay, read that and take notes. And he goes, okay, that's how you file a motion. And that would be like the extent of his training for me. And we'd sit there, and he'd want to BS about how corrupt the system is and stuff. But at least I got that tip when I was totally in the dark and didn't know anything. I had another guy who charged me $600 to do paperwork. He did the paperwork. I had to redo it because he wrote it all out of order and chaotic. He just copied and pasted my Word document notes. So there's a lot of hustlers and cons out there that are father's rights advocates. Don't ever use somebody that you can't see in person or talk to directly. There's a lot of online things. You submit your information. You give them like $300, $400, $500, $1,000, and they spit back a document that's full of crap and not consistent with what you're saying. Never talk to anybody who you can't talk to in person. Or use a service that you can't see anybody in person or a real person. But I barely have any information. I'm literally sharing 100 times the information that I got in my original custody battle. Most people I'm dealing with are in their original custody battle. They don't know anything. I'm sharing with you literally for free on my free videos 100 times the information. Now I have packets of winning documents. The link is below, where you can buy packets of actual arguments that I made. I never got that kind of stuff from people. I never got samples and head starts and leads on how somebody else argued and won in court. I'm giving you overwhelming countless amounts of information to make this thing 100 times easier than when I was totally in the dark and started off on my own. And people aren't even watching most of my videos. I'd be watching every single one of these videos. I'd be doing I was calling my mentor like once a week, and he wouldn't pick up the phone except once a month, because he was too burnt out on dealing with this stuff, and he didn't deal with half of the amount of people that I deal with. And people are just crapping on this information like they don't care. And if everybody just took this information and lit a fire under their attorney's butt to have them go in and fight the right way, or if you did it yourself, which is your best chance, nobody should get an attorney unless they're doing a limited appearance deposition. Outside of that, nobody should have an attorney. People ask me, oh, can I do my own paperwork, or can I do my own case representing myself? Have you listened to 1 minute of what I've said? All I ever talk about is representing yourself and how I did it and how countless thousands of other people did it. How guys who fired their attorney got more visitation or ended up getting full custody or 50-50 after they fired their attorney. How could you actually ask me, do you think I can do this? What do I talk about all day long in all my videos? How I got custody. Have you seen the hashtag? Or the monikers that I post? This information is out there. I mean, literally, I'm the only one doing this that I've known or seen. There were a few other people who basically fell off. They got burnt out or they passed away. I know one person, the guy who helped me passed away. The guy I told you ripped me off with $600. He did give me some good information, but he was also kind of a hustler and he ripped me off in some areas. He's gone. So there's nobody left doing this stuff. People should be reposting this stuff everywhere that they go. And not just so I can build my brand, but because it's the only source of information. This is the information I obtained that helped me win. I'm sharing a gold mine with people that cost you thousands of dollars if you want to get this information from attorneys. But attorneys aren't sharing it with you. And people just crap on this stuff, or people get mad if they want to talk to me directly, that I charge for my one-on-one time that I'm sacrificing away from family and away from work, away from other clients. This is part of the problem, is that men are our own number one enemy because we're lazy and shiftless. We want somebody to wave a magic wand and somebody else to do it. Or we grew up mama's boys. We want mommy to come save us. Nobody's coming to save you. This is your case. You were stupid like me and had a kid with a crazy woman, if you're a dad, or vice versa. I see moms on there talking about, oh, he's such a deadbeat, he's this and that. Oh, he was a great candidate to have 2, 3, or 4 kids. Why did you keep having kids with him? Well, I didn't recognize him until after. What, did he get postpartum after he had kids? Something was wrong with you. Something was wrong with me and my dumb mistake of messing around with my baby's mom. Okay? I knew I shouldn't have done it. I did it anyway. I own it. And I haven't made the same mistake since then. Okay? Now, that being said, we're our own worst enemy. There's a plethora of information out here. Why people call me after watching my videos off and on for 4 or 5 months and they say, oh, I watched like 2 of your videos. You're in a desperate situation where your life with your kid is at stake. Why wouldn't you watch every single one of my videos? Why are you waiting until the last minute, like a week before trial or a day before your hearing? Or, you got served and you saw my videos and you were encouraged, like, yeah, this guy's good. And then you don't do anything on your case. Why don't you get proactive now? Because we're lazy, shiftless bums by nature. The curse of Eve is pain during labor and wanting to rule over the man. That's why women buck and want to control men all the time. The curse of Adam is having to work for the food and stuff. So we're lazy and shiftless and we're drama free. So we let a woman punk us because we don't want the drama and we let them control us. And then they totally disrespect us and they get to a point where like, I'll just take the kids away from this little punk simp little bee. Because we just let them do it and we didn't act like a man and stand our ground and be a mature man and stand firm and be the leader of the household or whatever. Now, some women go into marriage and they plan this, they have this stuff all planned out, so you can't help that. But once you recognize this stuff and you start doing stuff like texting her, well, I'll kill you if you take the kids from me. That's another area where we lack common sense and we're our own worst enemy. You don't use the common sense that God gave a monkey. You create a paper trail that you're threatening somebody. Even though you don't mean it, it's still going to be used against you in court. Once I knew there was conflict between me and my baby's mom, I never did anything. I had her sign a piece of paper saying I gave her cash and I took a second job to help her while she was pregnant when I didn't have to. I never sent her, when she got a restraining order against me, I never talked to her. Never. Some guys will call the mother like, what are you doing? How can you do this? And the restraining order clearly says, if you violate this, you'll go to jail. You got to gather yourself and not be emotional and stop thinking, we should be able to work this out for the sake of kids. Why is she taking me to court? It doesn't matter. She's doing it. You got to fight. Somebody dropped a bomb on America. They're going to war. You don't need to figure out the psychology behind their decision or whether it was political or not. You need to pick up a gun and fight. It's kill or be killed. The end. So, one of the tools along the way are the information that your attorney isn't giving you. These 4 traumas that kids have, and 3 of them are inflicted by the alienating parent, by using the court system, withholding the kid, and putting the kid in conflict. It's all child abuse, and it should be called that. And if you got a punk, sissy, simp, little limp-wristed coward of an attorney, stop using them. Light a fire under the butt and make them work for you. They're your agent for your case. It's your case. It's not the attorney's case. The attorney can't say, oh, I look bad. I don't want to go. I'm going to go in front of that judge again. That's your reputation you got to protect. You're supposed to zealously advocate for me. There's a lot of attorneys who judges think are a-holes because they're zealously advocating for their client in criminal court because they practice real law and they follow their oath and their allegiance to their client. And your attorney, see, like I said, this only happens in family law. We don't go in and argue against the culture of discrimination like we do in civil rights cases or in public defense cases or in criminal cases. We don't go in there and zealously advocate for our clients in this case and attack the other side's credibility on the stand because it looks bad. Only in family law do the lawyers not do everything that all the other lawyers do. It's insane. That's why I would never use a lawyer. I do it myself. You want something done right, you do it yourself. These sellout punks that are only there to get your money and extort as much money as possible from you don't care about you or your case. End of story. So here's 4 things that deal with the kids and the welfare of the kids. And if the judge has an allegiance to the welfare of the kids, which they do, the best interest of the child, I tell the judge, you have an allegiance to the welfare of the child. What's better for the child? A toxic home or a non-toxic home? An alienating parent or a non-alien parent? A parent who deprives the kids and puts the kids in the middle of conflict and tells them hate your dad, or the home where the mother is celebrating and her pictures are on the wall and in the kid's room, and if the mother sends a toy over, I don't throw it in the garbage like the mother does. What's the best interest of the child? That home or this home? It's obvious. It's not even about me versus the mother as much as it is which home is the better environment for the child, and your number one allegiance is to the child. And if you don't do that because you have a political agenda or a bias, or like everybody else says off the record, this is an anti-father, pro-mother court system. If you're going to do that, then you're violating the child and you're dishonoring your oath and you're creating the problem. Here I am, a father in this day and age of all the absent fathers. Here I am wanting to be equally involved, and the mother wants to push me out. The only person in the world who thinks that a child doesn't need a father is this mother right here. The law says it. I quoted the law to you. You took an oath to uphold the best interests of the child. Everybody thinks the child needs both parents. She doesn't. She's an abusive parent. If you place a child with her, you're placing the child in a place of abuse. And you're just doing that out of routine and just rubber stamping because that's what you always do. And that's always the safe thing. Just give the kid to the mother. You have to look out for the welfare of the child. You have to act like you actually got a law degree and you earn that by knowing how to do legal research and evaluating the law, instead of just abusing your power and sitting up there and collecting $20,000 a month by just saying, oh, I'll just give custody, I'll just trust the guardian ad litem report, and somebody else is doing your work for you. Or you can blow it off on the guardian ad litem because they're a radical feminist man hater who never got hugged by their dad or got molested by their dad, and so they hate me, and so you just believe whatever they say. No, I attack the guardian ad litem. I expose them and put on a show in court and tell the court what the court is obligated to do. No attorney wants to do this. And you're paying an attorney thousands of dollars to sit there and sell you out and do the other side. The other side wants you to not be aggressive. The other side wants you to back down. The other side wants to strong arm you. The other side doesn't want you to call her out for her bringing several different men home, for her prostituting on the side, for her using drugs. She doesn't want you to do that. And then your attorney saying it's blasphemy to talk bad about the mother. 60% of child abuse are mothers. We've all seen stories or cases where mothers murder their kids or drown them in the bathtub because they wanted to send them to heaven. We all know that happens. But when we go in family court, we pretend like it doesn't. But then when we step out of family court, then the attorneys say, I can't believe how corrupt the family court system is. You create the culture of the court system. If 90% of attorneys go in there and say fathers need 50-50 and equal and fight for that, the system would change in a year. But they won't do it. So you have to do it. That's enough freebies, I guess so. The 4 things that traumatize a kid. Hopefully you got something out of that.